Today we're going to talk about the first real mission of the SIG. So, last video we talked about David Stirling's arrival and that he had a mission. What was his mission? Well, the British garrison at Malta was in trouble because they were an island under siege. The Germans didn't attack them, but they couldn't get supplies. Because when they got supplies, planes from 7 airfields would bomb the daylights out of the supply ships and would basically prevent these Maltese civilians from getting supplies. Malta, actually, every citizen in Malta ended up getting a medal at the end of World War II. Because of just the insanity that was living on Malta, just constant bombings, just insane amounts of bombings. Like the Blitz had nothing on Malta. Lindy Beige has a video on that. So anyway, they had figured out 7 airfields where this stuff was going on. They figured this stuff out. 7 airfields where these planes were coming from, and 5 of them were easy to take out. They were just sort of around. You could sneak through the desert and just smash this airfield and be gone. 2 of them, however, were pretty much impossible. There were giant German army units in between you and the airfield. There were checkpoints everywhere. There were Italian units all over the place. The SAS couldn't do it. The SAS and the LRDG and everyone else, the commandos, could not destroy these 2 airfields. And these airfields had bombers in them any of these bombers could just wreak havoc on the supply convoy, which was setting out in about 2 weeks on a specific date that could not be changed. So the LIDG and the SAS, they all had to act now. And so what Buck did was he took the entire of the SIG, every single person in the SIG, including the 2 trainers, and set out to escort the SAS. Now, not all the SIG went with Buck. He basically seconded like 2 or 3 men here, 2 or 3 men there. Every SAS unit that went out had like 2 or 3 of the SIG with them. Who could... one of the SIG actually went with this group, and they were stopped by an Italian, and the SIG guy berated the living crap out of this Italian until he just backed off. So that mission almost turned very deadly for those SAS operatives, if it wasn't for this SIG operative with them. So David Stirling found this extraordinarily useful, these guys. But the main one was the 2 SIG units were given 2 forces of Free French SAS. So the SAS with them were French, led by Lieutenant Jourdan. He's important. However, not everyone was happy with this. Jourdan and there was a minister, a religious figure. His name sounds Jewish, but his denomination is not given. And the men of the SIG talked to this religious figure, and they aired some grievances, which they had aired to Buck, but they aired to this man, who then went to Buck with the grievances again. They didn't like Bruckner. They didn't like this Sergeant Bruckner, this Unteroffizier Bruckner. They didn't like him. There's something about him they didn't. It's not they didn't trust him, because they did trust him, but they just didn't like the guy. They didn't want him coming with them. But Buck said, nonsense. Bruckner is a part of this unit. He's a part of the SIG. We're not going to just throw a man out because he's German. All of you are German too. And they're like, yeah, well, he fought for the German army. And it's nonsense. Bruckner's coming with us. Shut up. And so off they went. And they went to this airfield. On the way to the airfield, they came up to a checkpoint. It was actually funny that Buck in the lead car came around the blind corner and there was just a checkpoint there, and he barely swerved out of the way of the thing until the trucks behind him came up and waved the guys to, just blitz past this checkpoint, and they sort of waved apologetic, like, oh, we're in a hurry, and the checkpoint guards just sort of shrugged it off. So that was how good the security was. Oh, I should mention that. They had a German staff car, a Kubelwagen type thing, and then they had 2 or 3 German trucks, and a few captured British trucks. And the story was that they had captured these British soldiers and were taking them back to this area near Derna. They were taking them back to Derna for POW stuff. And so they put the guys in the back of the car, in the back of the thing, and a whole bunch of weapons under a bunch of tarps. They actually had 2 machine guns in each truck, locked and loaded, ready to go, belt magazines in them. All they had to do was pick them up and start firing away with the MG42s, MG34s, whatever. It's the same. For this purpose, it's the same weapon. Machine guns, they had MP40s, they had Tommy guns, Sten guns, everything in the back of these things. Rifles, grenades. Every man had a pistol. These guys were armed to the teeth in the back of these trucks, but they were made to look like POWs. And so they just blitzed past the first checkpoint, and they didn't really care. Oh, something I forgot to mention. They didn't know the password for June. They knew May's password. They didn't know June's password. And so they got to another checkpoint, and this Italian comes out and he sort of waves them down and stop at the checkpoint. And okay, so Buck gets out and he goes, "We're filthy. We've been in the desert for so long. We don't actually know we don't know the password." And the Italian goes back inside and gets his officer. And the Italian officer comes out and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" He's like, "Well, we don't know the password." He goes, I don't know what I can do. Come inside. And they drink wine. Shockingly, the Italian officer invites this guy in for a bunch of wines. And at the end, the Italian officer basically says, okay, this one time, I'm going to let you through because I've been told not to, but you seem like a nice guy. We had a few wines, we had a bit of cheese. Okay, I'll let you through, but figure out the password, right? Because the other guys won't. And so they drive along, and it's about dusk. Dusk is falling. They see a German camp over there, but like, you know what? Let's just go. We'll just get to our staging point because we have to hit these airfields tomorrow. We have to get them tomorrow because if we don't, then the convoy's going to get smashed. And as they're driving along, a fat German corporal who is, in my head, he's Sergeant Schultz, but a German corporal like runs out, starts waving them down, and they're like, "Oh crap, we don't know the password." And he's a German. He's probably going to be more efficient than those Italians. And, pulls them over, and instead of asking the password, he says, "Oh, you guys can't be driving around at night." And they go, "Oh crap, there's British saboteurs around. There's British spies around at night in this area. We heard rumors that there's going to be British agents operating around here." Okay. Thanks for the info. We'll be all right. No. You guys, I can't let you go through for your own safety. You guys have to go over there. You have to go to the camp. Come on, guys. Okay, we'll go to the camp. And they go to the camp, and they hang around for like an hour or two. And then they go, "Okay, let's try it." And they leave. They come up to the same checkpoint with the same German, and they basically say, "We'd love to. We've been ordered to go through. We just have to." One of these guys apparently knows something important. You know how it is. And the German goes, "Okay. Oh, by the way, before we leave, you wouldn't happen to know the password for this month, would you? We know last month's password, but we haven't got a clue of this month's password." And the German just sort of gets very defensive. He's, "You know the password? Neither do I." And the German checkpoint guard has no idea what the password is, and he goes inside and he smashes on the door. "Get up!" And he wakes his Italian guy who's manned in the same checkpoint with him. "What's the password?" Now the guy goes, "What? Has it changed?" So they get the book out. They get the book with the passwords in it, and they start flipping through. It's like, "Oh, this month's password, and this is the actual password, is El Dorado." So they go, "Oh, yeah, the password's El Dorado." It's like, "Oh, thank you very much for that information." That's how easy it was. Anytime you see these spy movies where it's like, they have to crack these, like, you can't just bluff your way past a checkpoint. They literally just gave you the password. After knowing there were British saboteurs, the British agents in the area, they're just handing out the password, which they don't even know. It just made me laugh. Oh, anyway. So onwards they go. And they set up a camp 5 miles between the two airfields. And half the force goes with Essner, and half the force go with him. Tiffin is actually the one who stays behind. Tiffin is there to radio back to HQ when something is, when they're successful. He just sort of stays with a bunch of the vehicles. They leave most of the trucks. Yeah, they leave a couple of trucks behind just in case. And the other half with Bruckner sets out. And Lieutenant Jourdan of the Lieutenant Jourdan, with the SAS, I should call him Lieutenant Jourdan, because Lieutenant is actually the French way of saying it, which is where the Americans get it from, by the way. They take the French pronunciation, not the French meaning of the word. Anyway, Lieutenant Jourdan goes with the one group, and their group is led by Bruckner. Well, not led by, Bruckner is driving the truck. And it takes him in 5 miles, it takes him an hour. He just, broke down, won't work. Oh, the clutch just slipped, and now I got to get down to, it's overheating. And Jourdan's not happy with it. He doesn't like this at all. Jourdan doesn't like Bruckner. He was one of the guys who raised objections to Bruckner. He doesn't like this. And they get just outside the German airfield. They're just like literally in a little, around the corner, just out of sight. And Bruckner slams on the brakes. And he's like, it's overheated at the worst possible time. Gets out, opens the engine. I need to get help, and runs. And Jourdan is panicking at this point. He leans out of the window, and he sees a German start walking towards the car, just like, "Oh, you broke down, have you?" And then Bruckner runs out with an officer, and the truck is surrounded by Germans. And before anyone can do anything, the Germans are yelling, "Get out, Frenchmen! Hands up!" Okay. What do? Well, one of these are proper good SAS Frenchmen. One of them grabs the MG34 and just sticks it through the side and just starts shooting. A couple of other guys throw the grenades. They pick up the Tommy guns or the Sten guns. They just start shooting. Jourdan is thrown from the vehicle by a grenade blast. He's thrown from the vehicle, dragged out of the vehicle. Sorry, the person who dragged him out is then killed. Jourdan starts sort of trying to get some cover, get away from the thing so he can turn around. He's only got a pistol, and he's thrown down by a grenade blast. The fighting actually continues until the last SAS alive pulls the pin on a grenade and puts it in the ammunition and actually blows the whole truck up and kills himself and basically suicide detonates the truck and injures a whole bunch of Germans. Jourdan is the only person to survive from this raid, and he runs. And he runs 5 miles through the night until he gets back to where Tiffin and the rest of the SIG are. The other SIG had a fantastic raid. They destroyed 27 M110s. Heinkel. The other guys had a fantastic raid. They destroyed 27 bombers. They're fine. The convoy ended up getting through. It was a success despite this last airfield not being destroyed. But, yeah, they were fine. They smashed their way through. And then Lieutenant Jourdan comes back, bleeding heavily. He didn't even know he was wounded until he got to the SIG rendezvous point and couldn't speak. He just slurring his words until he realized that he was actually quite badly injured. But he managed to say to them, "Everyone's dead. Bruckner betrayed us, but I think we got him." And what the SIG wrote, and they probably shouldn't have done this, what they wrote in their report was, "We were betrayed by Bruckner, but he's dead." And that was not true at all. Bruckner had actually been flown personally to Rommel, who flew Bruckner personally to Adolf Hitler, who gave him a very high medal. And basically, he told Hitler everything. As in, I don't mean like he told Hitler everything. Adolf Hitler himself. And Adolf Hitler personally sent a verbal message to Rommel and to every single officer in North Africa. A verbal message which was erroneously written down by someone and transmitted over Ultra, which was how the British got their hands on it. And that's how the British knew that Bruckner was still alive. The verbal message was, "Sergeant Bruckner," or whatever his real name was, "has informed us that the British are using covert operatives, codenamed SIG." He knew the freaking code name. "They're camped here. Here's their passport numbers," so they had to change all those. "Here's their cover storage and names," so they had to change all those. "And these guys are to be killed out of hand on the spot." It's actually, the directive was to be shot out of hand. They can be considered enemy combatants. They're to be considered traitors and enemy combatants, which technically under international law they were, but calling them for them to be shot out of hand was also breaking international law. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It's Adolf Hitler. It doesn't matter. And this verbal command was actually written down and panicked a lot of people. So, what had happened? Well, remember how I said before that the German corporal had said that you better be careful because there's British operatives and saboteurs operating in this area? Well, Bruckner must have told them, mustn't he? Bruckner didn't tell them about that. Bruckner had radioed the commander of the airfields, the 2 airfields that they were going to, and Bruckner had basically contacted the airfield commanders and told them what was happening. But the general German army didn't know from Bruckner. They knew from someone else. They knew from a man called Boner F. Fellers. Boner F. Fellers. F. That's an American thing, isn't it, to initialize the middle name? You know, it's Harry S. Truman, George B. McClellan. It's an American thing to initialize the middle name. So who was Fellers? Fellers was the military attaché for the United States of America in Cairo. And Fellers was actually being quite a good person and sending details of everything back to his government and his military officials. By the way, this guy was a protege of Douglas MacArthur. Yes, Douglas MacArthur screws up again, and one of the guys that he's sort of culturing turns out to be just broadcasting incredibly sensitive information just on the radio that we've already know Rommel is very, very keen on intercepting, and the Germans actually have the American code books. Because the British, when the American army joins World War II, they are very anti-British. We tend to think of this like two groups, two old friends just getting together. The Americans don't like the British. The head of the American Navy really hates the British. He'd actually been wargaming wars against the British. He refuses to use British anti-submarine tactics, which is why when you look at graphs of submarine losses, they just skyrocket when the Americans get involved, because they refuse to... One of the things they refuse to do, this is how insane it is, they refuse to black out New York at night. And so when the convoys leave New York, the subs sitting off the coast of the US just follow them, because you can just clearly see this illuminated silhouette of a ship. Like they refuse to do even the most basic things. They don't do basic submarine they don't do basic submarine prevention technology. They don't do hedgehogs. They still run with depth charges. Anyway, the Americans were very not good at getting on board. The British had learned a whole lot of stuff, and the British weren't at the start of the war either. But the British had learned a whole bunch of stuff. The Americans just didn't want to bother learning it from the British. The British got pretty pissed off at this, actually. So fellas had basically told the Germans that something was going on. He didn't know the particulars. He didn't know what airfields were going on, but he's like, oh yeah, on this day there's going to be a British special forces operation in this area around Derna here. I was like, oh crap. So he's alerted everyone, and then when Bruckner comes along and says, oh, we're going to hit these airfields, he tells them like very little notice, just to sort of alert them so that he can not get shot as soon as he walks over there. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. So what was the result? Well, 14 members of the French SAS were either dead or captured. At that point, it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, these guys aren't... They were captured alongside guys in German uniforms. Ugh. 2 members of the SIG were killed. 2 were killed. One of them was... 2 were killed, and a further man was so wounded that he actually managed to stumble into a hospital where he just pretended he was a German soldier. But the Germans knew, because of Bruckner, the Germans knew that not all German soldiers were German soldiers, and they found out that this guy was indeed a spy, and he was tortured to death. Tortured to death by the Germans. So 3 SIG members are killed. Lieutenant Jourdan is the only one who gets away, and he's pretty badly wounded. Remember how I said, remember this phrase. The British MPs, British intelligence, Camp 020, MI5, MI6, the SOE, had all cleared these 2 men, Bruckner and Essner, to be trainers of the SIG, not combat operatives. They were not cleared to be in the field. They were not cleared to be in combat. It is extraordinarily different to simply work against your own country in secret than it is to actively fight against your own country in secret. And Bruckner wasn't ready to fight against his own country, and he didn't have to be ready to fight against his own country because he wasn't supposed to be. He was supposed to be a trainer. But Captain Buck was so trusting. Buck is actually the other guy that runs the unit, whose name escapes me now, and I haven't got it written down this page, so I'll persevere. You'll find out about him later. The other guy is extremely untrustworthy, and at this point Buck is basically told, you are not allowed to vet people anymore. You're simply leading the unit. The recruitment and vetting process is going to be taken over by this guy. Oh, by the way, no more trainers in combat. This actually gives the SOE a bad name for... by the way, no more trainers in combat. You've been warned. You were told not to do it originally. Well, you weren't told not to do it. You weren't told you could do it, which to them is the British higher-ups running this whole thing was sort of like, it's the same thing. If we don't say you can, that means you can't, which defeats the whole purpose of the special forces in the first place. But anyway. So, yeah, that radically changes it. And Essner was loyal. Essner actually did fight against his own people, but Essner was... It couldn't work out. Essner was taken back to a POW camp, and that's what happened to Essner. On paper. What really happened to Essner was that he tried to escape and was shot. On paper. What really, really, really happened to Essner was that they drove him back to a POW camp, stopped in the middle of the road, and then blew his brains out, made him stand by the side of the road, and just killed him in cold blood. Murdered him, and then made it look like a failed escape. That's what actually happened to Essner. They just murdered him in cold blood. Remember how this story started out all friendly, tying guys up who've been driving truck. He was driving a truck for the enemy. That's not reason to kill someone. Tie him up. Now it's like, well, he actually did exactly what we thought he would do. He performed above and beyond what he was even cleared to do. He fought for us valiantly. Well, not fought for, but he assisted us valiantly. Blow his brains out with a pistol on the side of the road because we want to clean all the loose ends up. So that's what happened to poor Essner. Meanwhile, Bruckner got off scot-free. He actually got a bunch of rewards. So Essner probably should have betrayed the British at this point because it would have turned out far better for him if he had, since he died. Bruckner actually tried to set up his own infiltration unit, and the British got word of this, that Bruckner was setting up his own infiltration unit. Well, not to the level the British had done it, because Rommel wouldn't approve that, but not approve of that. Rommel just didn't think that the infrastructure to support that. There just weren't that many. There weren't really any British troops fighting for the Germans. So Rommel basically was setting up counter-desert insurgency operations, or counter-desert, counter-SAS, counter-LRDG troops. And Bruckner was going to be a part of that. What Bruckner also did, the big thing Bruckner did, was he revealed to Rommel and to the German High Command that no, it wasn't. These weren't native troops. These weren't locals doing these raids led by the SAS, the LRDG. It wasn't like 5 British troops leading a whole bunch of natives or locals on these things to shot at their airfields. It was just British SAS and LRDG. It was the British commandos. It was the British Army and the SOE doing these raids. The Germans didn't even know that. The Germans just thought they got some specialists and they're being led by locals. They did not know the British had attained this level of comfort in the desert. They didn't know the British could do this. They knew they could do it, but they didn't know that the British themselves knew how to do this. They thought it was, again, native troops. So they got in contact. Remember I said in the last video that the British were taught by 2 of the 4 best desert explorers in the world, and another one was actually flying for the British Army and flying for the British Air Force, and he would be killed shortly. There was a 4th man in that unit who had been under strict watch from the British intelligence. The British thought he was an Italian spy. The Italians thought he was a British spy. He was drafted into the German army in 40 or 39 or 40. And he was basically just drawing up maps because he was quite old. He was a veteran of the First World War. He was a flying ace in the First World War. He was living in Hungary, by the way, sorry. His name was Laszlo Almásy. He was a Hungarian aristocrat. And he was brought over to North Africa to start running desert operations of his own. This would succeed but fail. He would succeed in putting the guys on the ground, but because of Ultra, they would basically just find them immediately and pick up the German agents. So the Germans sort of retired this guy afterwards, but he was actually brought over, and the Allies sort of panicked when they heard that this guy was in town, because this was the guy that they really didn't want the Germans getting this level of desert operating warfare. Something that's really funny about Almásy is he retired in 43. The Germans just let him go back to civilian life. And Almásy actually wrote a book about his time in the German army and sort of what he'd got up to. Not crazy. But Hungary, of course, fell to communism after the Second World War. And I laughed when I read this. This is communism. And if it wasn't such a cancer on humanity, it would be so funny that this is how the communist legal system worked. If it wasn't like responsible for just tens, if not 100 million dead people, tens and tens of millions of dead bodies, it would be funny. It did make me laugh. He was charged with collaborating with the enemy. And the evidence that was used for this was his book, which could not be entered into evidence because the Soviets had banned his book. The communist government had banned his book, so the judge and the prosecutor couldn't read it, which meant that there were no evidence against him, which meant that he was free to go. The Soviets, and they didn't just want to extrajudicially kill this guy because he was a war hero. But if they could prove that he was fighting for the enemy, that was different. They couldn't prove it, and there would have been public order issues if it wasn't proven. So yes, because of their own totalitarian cracking down on books and cracking down on all this stuff, they actually had to let a guy who legitimately did actually fight for the German army and probably should have been charged as a collaborator, they let him go. Because of their own inefficiency. That just makes me laugh. If it wasn't so damn destructive, it would be funny. This sort of thing happens. That's something that would happen in a novel, isn't it? Like, you're being charged with crimes against the state. It's like, how do you know that? It's like this document that you're not allowed to read, and the judge isn't even allowed to read. It's so sensitive. That's like straight out of a spy movie, isn't it? Like, you're being charged with espionage because you gave these secrets to the enemy. It's like, what secrets? You can't prove I gave them secrets? It's like, well, here we go. We'll declassify them and make them public so we can charge you with the crimes. It's like, that's actually how a lot of intelligence stuff works today, by the way, is they can't prosecute some people for things because in order to prosecute them, they would have to make the evidence public through discovery, which would defeat the purpose of, you know what I mean. So that was part 4. Thank you very much for watching. We're going to go back to the Operation Caravan and the other mission that's coming up next. For those who don't know what the next mission is going to be, it is actually the plan to seize Tobruk. Yep, Tobruk. 80 men are going to take Tobruk with help from other people. But 80 men are going to take Tobruk. So let's find out what their plans are as we come back to the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.